Hello, dear internet friends, frauds, and trolls. I'm back with another video, this time doing a rerun, a second take of a previous video I did on the topic that concerns nobody, which is why I think I've never fallen in love in 40-something years throughout my life. It was suggested I could do a better delivery, and I also agree I could improve on that, so I'm going to give it another try. And in the backdrop, you guys will be seeing one of my recent paintings. It's a bunch of seagulls immigrating away from where they are, leaving, abandoning, taken off, and the whole thing is protected by just evil eye, which is a symbol that is very traditional in the part of the world I'm from. So here we go. I've never been in love. Is that weird? No, I'm not a sociopath. In fact, I know for a fact this contains zero pathology. Well, let me explain. I really think it's an absolute prerequisite to be somewhat dumb, young, and inexperienced to fall in love with a man. This didn't happen to me even in my dumbest, most naive 20s. I just wasn't dumb enough to see through the bullshit that seems necessary to catch feelings. I have a brain that is like an analog camera with what I call a future lens, which cannot be removed or updated. Nothing can deter a present moment mistake from occurring like a crisp vision of the future. Upon the first glimpse, I take an x-ray of his struggling soul, his unwillingness to grow. I detect every subtle and blunt lie to enhance or enlarge the looks of everything he has that comes in a size smaller than he claims. Especially having a built-in lie detector is going to be the number one thing to prevent a woman from falling. So we all know most men lie like they breathe, and falling in love almost always seems to involve lying to self or putting an effort to convince oneself to believe implausible things, such as the empty promises that are usually just blurted casually at the beginning of a relationship. When you know also that you cannot know anyone until their character is put to test, meaning when money or health issues come up, say a man goes up in status, or as you get sick as a woman and become unable to give him what he wants or what he needs, only then can you really know who he is. And that takes time and life to just happen. When things are good, it's healthy to keep a highly skeptic and even paranoid attitude towards people in general. I think this is Laurentian wisdom type thing that I feel like I should share with you. And my entire life, I've only known men who prove their lack of love and empathy simply when I tell them how they made me feel. So it typically for me didn't even just take hardship, but just me expressing genuine feelings alone, even if they were just slightly negative, that was enough for them to call the quits. And obviously also for me to lose respect. I just think if they couldn't even handle that, let alone handle life's inevitable challenges with me, I didn't think so. How can I fall and stay in love with someone who is so unsafe to be myself with? And that, I believe, is the primary missing ingredient when it comes to falling in love. Call it lady intuition, but please don't call it, oh, you're projecting your negativity and sabotaging a possibly good thing, or you have impossible standards, something we hear a lot. Loving someone and falling in love is not the same thing. I know for a fact falling in love is a state of denial and suppression of many cognitive functions that normally aid us in making better and more rational decisions in daily life. But that whole crazy influx of hormones, they can certainly hijack that system. In my case, however, the very release of those hormones were quite stubborn and slow to act, almost to the point of possibly calling myself asexual, perhaps this is the underlying thing anyway, but I couldn't also fully say that, to be honest. So after 6 years of formal psychology education, which is my educational background, by the way, and 3 decades of self-reflection, doing a lot of analysis, spending, almost my entire life alone, figuring out why I do what I do and how I feel and why, I believe I am the type of lady that requires that extreme, marginal, and rare kind of alpha wolf energy. I am just extremely strong-headed and stubborn and unwavering and outside the box free thinking type of lady. And I'm very disagreeable and self-motivated, that only the kind of energy that is right there with that, equivalent to that, or that could top that I think could enter my radar. I immigrated overseas on my own 4 times. So that alone gives me so much self-respect. And I believe that automatically puts me in a place where I require that kind of level of feeling that level of respect for someone else. So I did get involved with opposite sex several times at quite superficial and unsatisfactory levels. I would say the levels they couldn't surpass. Every time I made a mistake with a man, I did it knowingly. I always knew the game and the motives. I always knew men were more of a liability for me. I always sort of knew that there were too many risks in getting involved with a majority of men. And that made me very reasonably cautious. So even in my dumbest, most naive 20s, I prioritized the relationship with myself. And I grew up seeing women sacrificing their all to stay in relationships where they didn't even respect the man, and the relationship was detrimental to both parties. I've always known it could only be a woman's inherent lack of self-worth that allowed them to fall prey to these types of relationships where the man is at best insufficient, at worst dangerous, because women have to choose wisely, and if they're choosing something that's not for their best interest, that has to have something to do with how she perceives herself and her self-worth. So as for me, it was never a mistake in hindsight when I knew all along that the man is wrong and clearly a garbage truck heading my way in foresight. So there were no surprises, really. When you take another shot of alcohol knowing how much you're going to suffer the next day with the hangover, it's kind of like that. So I was able to say no to that drink more than most women around me, which is a good self-protective measure. And it wasn't as hard for me to say no, because if I liked a guy, all he had to do was open his mouth for me to lose respect and attraction in a matter of minutes. You know how there's zero doubt when you meet a dog as to whether he likes you or not? I had zero doubt. I know for a fact that no man has ever really loved me in my life, and I know that the one or two that seemed to had everything to do with the possibility of schmegs. I have always been fully aware that they never loved the human being of me. I never bothered to look deeply into my soul, to study what makes me unique, to acquire the knowledge of what makes me happy, sad, or mad. A woman who is average and decent looking like myself may have plenty of guys who typically like a body part of you, or the feeling they get from you as the source of a feeling which makes them feel more manly, more powerful, and needed. But stripped of all that, I haven't really witnessed a man loving a woman like one loves a flower for just existing and without wanting to pick it up for his self-interest or for the looks, namely anything outside the context of what benefits him. The true objective of a man's love and desire seems to me to be the image of themselves in the woman's eyes. This has never been sufficient to settle for as a self-respecting woman for me. I know that when you love anything, whether an inanimate object or a living being, you get the urge to want to study it and learn everything about it so that you can be in tune with its needs. Any true dog lover will read and ask questions to experts, dog trainers, veterinarians, and look attentively to the dog's body language and try to pick up any cues that can improve their communication. Anything beyond this is habit, attachment, a business transaction, but not love. Without love, there's no trust. Without trust, there's no surrender and there's no union. All these tests of courage, honesty, integrity, intelligence, open-heartedness for the mere promise of schmegs. And at this point in my life, I'm an average-looking middle-aged lady. They weren't too excited about that either, A spiritually evolved man whose actions aren't dictated by ego, a man with the set in motion gene, the self-starter, the courage of responsibility, and a generous heart, the qualities that make someone carry alpha energy. There were no competitors in that sport for me. So, a man who is so aware and in control of his dark side, he would never dare let it spill out and hurt others. And on top of that, chooses to love the essence of me so I can feel fully safe and confident in that relationship. I just never had anything even close to that. None of them saw me and heard me. None of them cared for what I felt or what I thought, although there was plenty of pretense. And my honesty was never welcomed. And to me, this is the most important part. It was always met with a complete shutdown and abandonment and this excessive defensiveness, which is like the absolute exhibition of insecurity. None of them would care to fix an issue to keep me in their lives. So when the truth came out of how I felt, it was always met with either a complete shutdown or total abandonment, ditching, ghosting, completely taking off. All the men I ever met, they want me laughing at their jokes while my good jokes go unlaughed. I have really beautiful skin, I think, and just goes uncaressed, but they want their urges satisfied, and the contents of our conversations remain ankle deep. And so forget about intimacy, forget about acknowledging my intellectual competence or learning from my unique ideas, forget about being concerned with my experience aside from what my unhappiness says about them. Sort of like a friend I knew whose husband was the biggest jerk, didn't love his wife at all, but cared about her feedback in the bedroom, just to feel accomplished about his ability to make her climax. And no, I don't think that's an expression of love and care. So the men I've known throughout my life, they never came to give. They came to take, to extract. And because they didn't love me, they always were stingy. They lacked the wisdom of nature, where it's clear that a feminine element thrives and receives, flourishes, and multiplies wonderful things only when the masculine element takes the initiative to give, nurture, and protect. So these things happen as a response to the first move a masculine person makes. So these men didn't give me anything to make me want to open my heart to let them in. Especially later in life, became crystal clear that without investment of time, energy, and money, a man will value nothing. The fact that materially I've always been a minimalist who is happy with the bare minimum did not make me dumb enough not to see the generosity as the marker of a good heart. It's absolutely true that stingy with money and stingy with heart correlates. Their lack of interest in me was readily met by my indifference. towards their banal existence and lack of effort to prove themselves respect-worthy, there was no denying the mismatch between their words and actions, and there's no pill to help me digest the fact that they lie without batting an eye if it promises them pleasure or some social status gain. I have this deep yearning to feel that respect, to look up to a man and say, I'm honored to know you, sir. I yearn to feel respect for a man, even if it isn't one for a relationship. And even more disappointing were the nice men who are rather more cowardly and they're puppets to other more powerful men. This is just as upsetting for me to witness. The ones who don't stand up for what's right because they know deep down they're too weak and they don't have the courage to do that. And this is literally, I feel like, 98% of all men. And how sad is that, right? They don't directly do you harm, but they're the ultimate enablers of horrible men. And like anyone who works for or supports a politician or an establishment that is toxic to society and the environment, and who work for the money, completely dissociated from the ethical aspects of what their labor is contributing to, they're the ones who never take the responsibility to warn or actively try to change anything that these other horrible men do. So they're accomplices. The nice men are usually accomplices of terrible men. So they won't protect you when you need them. These are spineless men who cannot be trusted. It is therefore impossible to be attracted to these men, a healthy female. So I wish I could tell you I've experienced deep love and respect for another male being, and I wish I knew what it was like to feel I could completely surrender to someone who truly cared for my own well-being. I wish I knew what being supported and provided for by a man out of love felt like. I will say that I consider myself lucky that I've never seen this as a big loss. If anything, I see this as a type of God's protection, because nature is fair to us still in that our lesser reliance or need for men makes up for the shortage of these good, eligible men. The world would truly be hell, I think, if we actually needed men as much as they need us. So any guy out there who got this far listening to me, please just be a good friend, brother, cousin, neighbor, colleague. That whole lover and life partner thing, just most of us have already long given up, especially around my age. So, but you can still be cared for as a fellow human being in the eyes of the average lady, if you just learn to see her worth as a fellow human separate from her sexual value. And that's it for me today. Thank you so much for listening and hope to see you in the next one. Bye.